Thanks for joining us behind the bins. I'm Kate.
And I'm Tim, and we're aiming to lift the lid on the world of waste.
So each episode we'll pose a question to our guests and listeners to find out a bit more about the inner workings of the waste industry.
So this week's question is, who decides my bin day?
The short answer is the councils, isn't it? So I guess maybe the deeper question is, how do they decide it? Historically, that would have been highlighters and a map. I think we've got lots of customers who would have done all of their route planning by kind of sitting around and lots of local knowledge. We're now seeing more people using digital options for the routing, I think.
Yes, it's effectively a huge data problem, isn't it? Tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of bins to be picked up over a weekly or 2 weekly schedule on 4 or 5 working days each week. Some places 5.5 working days. So yeah, working out the best way to collect all those bins over that cycle so that they all get done in the most efficient way possible.
I think changing someone's bin day is like quite a controversial thing to do as well. So for most local authorities, that's going to be the last option. They can change who collects the bins, but the when tends to be quite static until it probably gets to a point where you've got real struggles around capacity and resourcing. You know, as new builds come into play, as areas grow, you might get an area that becomes a bit lopsided. And so I think it probably takes quite a lot to get to the point for most councils where they'll say, this isn't working anymore. We've added a few in here, we've added a few in there, and we actually need to, pull the whole thing apart and look for the efficiencies.
Yeah, when you change bin days, whether you change it for everybody or just for some people, you've got to do comms. You've got to get the message out to people, and you've got to deal with the inevitable fact that the message won't get to everybody or they'll forget. So that change is really difficult. If you're just keeping the days the same, but you're going to send a different crew and they might actually end up arriving at a slightly different time, that's much easier to manage. But as you say, you do get to a point where you have to change the days. I was talking to one council who basically have a river through the middle of their patch. Mm-hmm. So there's like the north of the river and the south of the river. All of the house building's taking place on one side. So, no matter how much you try and balance things, at some point you have to change the days because crossing rivers is operationally difficult because you've got restrictions on roads and so on. And you can't efficiently hop from one side to the other. You just have to change the days for at least some people, which is difficult.
I think fundamentally most councils will have one collection day for their residents, but actually we don't see that everywhere, do we? We've got some customers that you might have your refuse and recycling collected on a Monday and garden waste on a Thursday, which surprised me when I saw that because I think it's pretty rare.
Yeah, I think, again, you're doubling the number of things that people have to remember, doubling the number of days that people have to, trundle down the street with their bin. Yeah, so definitely the majority case is that people have one bin day, which inevitably means that you're maximising the efficiency for one of the bins. So you might optimise for the grey bins, and then inevitably the blue ones and the green garden bin or whatever end up being slightly less efficient, but that's just operationally sensible.
What do we think the other challenges are for local authorities when they're deciding on bin days and areas?
I think there's a few things that limit it. You only see your own bin, but if you think of it from the other end, all that waste is going somewhere. So not only does the council have to balance the collections so they make sense to the residents, they've also got to keep that material flowing into the disposal sites. You couldn't collect all of the grey waste in 1 week and all the garden waste in the following week, because then you'd have a really unbalanced flow of waste into the disposal sites. Mm-hmm. So you have to think from that perspective as well.
I think it's also worth thinking about missed collections. So we'll find that often councils will do zonal areas so that if collections are missed on a Monday, the crews are not that far away on the Tuesday and it's easier to send them back. So yeah, thinking about the flow of the week as well as the collections on any given day. Yes,
and you generally want your crews to all be working in roughly the same area at any time. So if you've got a vehicle breakdown or crew shortages, you've got flexibility to move things around without them all being at opposite sides of the town. But again, the flip side to that is that you tend to concentrate the traffic congestion that's caused by the vehicles. You might have 20 vehicles come out of the depot and they all go down the same bit of road to start in the same patch. So you've got all those things just to balance up, and there's no perfect answer. But these are the sort of things that councils have to take into account when they're working out what day they're going to come and get your bin.
There's quite a lot to it, really, isn't there, when you start kind of scratching beneath the surface?
As you said, the way councils do that has moved from being highlighter and pen to being more computerised these days. What's the typical process that a council's going through to change a bin day or balance those routes up?
I suppose the starting point is often, what does it look like now? And I think most councils will want to retain as many of the same days as they can. So some will throw the whole thing into usually route optimization software now, whether that's a system that integrates with ours or, our own. There's various options available, but I think that tends to be how most people are doing route optimization now. There's not many that are still doing it manually with pens and maps. So yeah, chucking stuff into an algorithm and trusting what comes out the other end is a bit of a challenge, isn't it? There is still that local knowledge. So I think what would usually happen is the system will tell you something, and then someone looks at that and says, oh, that street doesn't quite make sense on a Monday because the schools are always busier, or whatever it is that sort of layers the local knowledge on top and tweaks it around the edges. But you've got the systems and the algorithms doing the legwork for it.
I found that if you start by building your as-is model and running the optimizer against that, if you get comfortable that what the optimizer is producing for what you do now matches what you see in terms of the mileage people are covering, what time they're getting back, what problems they're encountering, then you can be a little bit more confident that when you change things, it's going to give you the right answer. So yeah, that baselining as-is model is pretty useful.
Have you got a fun fact on this topic then, Tim?
Well, I do. We're talking about optimising the collections of thousands and thousands of bins. Where and when was the wheelie bin invented?
Ooh, I'm going to say 1976 in Germany.
No. When I researched this, I thought this is going to be one of those things where it turns out that Michelangelo invented it, but it wasn't. It was invented in Slough in 1968.
Oh, really?
There you go. It's a British invention, so it's all our fault.
Well done, Slough.
Well done, Slough. Yeah. They invented the wheelie bin and was the home of the office. What more could they want? So next up, we're joined by our guest from Dorset Council. Dorset has been through a process of becoming a unitary from multiple smaller districts. They still operate out of several depots in quite a large, mostly rural area. So they have been tackling the route optimisation challenge over a number of years, and we will ask them how they choose the Dorset bin days.
Welcome, Matt. Thanks for joining us. So Matt is with us from Dorset Council, and they are in the midst of route reorganisation and redesign. Do you want to share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, morning, Kate. Morning, Tim. So we embarked on this programme probably a good 2, if not 3 years ago. So we had challenges in Dorset where certain rounds were becoming overloaded with new property development, and also where we used to be boroughs and separate boroughs and districts, so 7 different authorities. We had rounds which fit that legacy model. We're now a unitary. So we embarked on a programme to get some key baseline data about what our rounds were actually doing, which was quite in-depth, essentially, working out specific weights on rounds, and attributing that to bins on streets and collection times by street. So really quite a high quality baseline model. And then, using that to redesign all our rubbish recycling and food waste rounds across Dorset to not only rebalance them as they are at the moment to make efficiencies, but we've worked with our planning department to understand the projected growth for the next 5 years, understanding where that's going to be, and then plotting that and building that as part of our model. So we're future-proofing what we're developing. So I think we are around 70,000 properties into the changes and about 110,000 to go.
So have you been rolling those changes out incrementally?
Yeah. So we've across Dorset, we've got 5 depots, but we've been working depot theme. So we've been taking a depot area, working with that depot local knowledge, and then break it down into sort of chunks like that.
You mentioned local knowledge there. Obviously, historically, it would have been guys who knew the routes inside out, sort of sitting down with paper and highlighters and maps to do the routing, or on spreadsheets. How are you finding applying that local knowledge alongside the sort of automated optimization packages?
Probably in one word, invaluable. I think a system can only do so much. It was good, so it comes up with a sort of concept. And then it's that refinement piece, which is really important because, the system will say this is the most efficient route, but, the crew will always bring something into, the drivers in particular, will bring something into the conversation going, well, if you can't turn left there because there's a car that always parks in the corner, you can't actually get around that corner. So how about we do it this way? But it creates a conversation piece that sort of starts with an optimum model, an efficient model, and then just a bit of polishing. And I think the really valuable thing that we're learning as part of this, which we thought we knew at the beginning, but it's really been reinforced with this project, is the hearts and minds piece. If I'm being honest, it's a bit like turkeys voting for Christmas around redesign, because essentially we want to try and get our crews doing more generally across the board to create some efficiency. So making sure that we're doing it with them so they're on board shaping that, and we're taking their comments on board and making changes based on their feedback, I think is really, really valuable. So far, like I say, we're 2 depots in, that's 70,000 properties in, and so far, touch wood, all has gone really well. Really good feedback so far.
You say you're going depot by depot. Does that imply that each household is staying with the same depot, or has there been any cases where houses are now served by a different depot, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, so we have a design principle in Dorset, which is we want all of our waste collections to be on the same day. So from a customer-facing side of things, it's simple. Although your different waste streams will change. So just to clarify, we have fortnightly rubbish, fortnightly recycling on alternate weeks, and then weekly food waste. So that was a design principle that we had. But what we have identified is within existing resources. So I'll take our Bridport depot. We optimized that, and we found that actually we had 3 rounds spare at the end of that modelling. So we've moved those 3 rounds to take another proportion of another depot's area. And the idea is we've started in the west of the county because we know we're fairly resource rich in that area. And we're moving that free capacity gradually eastwards where we're resource deficient because there's a majority of new property growth in that area. So it's sort of lifting and shifting gradually everything and that spare capacity eastwards. So in answer to your question, Tim, we're starting with a depot area and remodelling the properties that depot currently service. But if there's spare capacity, we're then taking rounds off of other depots and bringing it into the scope of that depot.
Have you had a lot of day changes for residents? Is that something that you aim to avoid? How's the comms go around that? What do you find the sort of impact is of doing those changes, and how can you do that in the most sort of efficient way?
So we started out with a principle of we want to minimise as many day changes as possible, A, for confusion, and B, cost, and the primary driver of it as well. But we soon found that we'd have to compromise efficiency. So we took a decision very early on, what do we want to do? Do we want to do this cheaply, but carry some inefficiencies in the rounds? Or are we going to be brave, rip it up and put it back together and accept that there'll be a large scale of day changes? And unfortunately, we've taken the latter approach, which is significant number of day changes. So I think across the 2 areas we've done so far, I think we're averaging about 85% of residents have had a day change, which is quite significant. So our comms approach, we still use a model that when we rolled out our current wheel bin service years ago, sort of started 2012, 2015, we used the same model because it worked effectively then. We've refined it a bit over the years, but essentially we write to every household to inform of the changes. That seems to work quite well with calendars and collection dates, explicitly on there. The other thing that we build into it is what we call bridging collections, but that catch-up collections. Obviously, moving from fortnightly services, there can be an extended gap between some collections. So we identify those and put additional collections in place just to sort of as a transitional arrangement. And that works generally quite well. And then we work really well with our comms team, our central comms team. So they do a big piece in the local communities with the town and parish councils, local councillors and local media outlets to basically say, we are making changes, look out for a letter. If you don't receive a letter, assume nothing's changing, which is a really key message, because if people didn't receive a letter, we were inundated in the past of queries, if you will. So that's worked really well. So yeah, I mean, you have your hiccups, you always have a few challenges, but nothing that we've not been able to overcome.
I think it's really good to hear that it's maybe not quite as scary as people think. So many local authorities, changing days is often off the table. Like, we're definitely not changing days and we'll just build the efficiencies we can. But as you say, you're not going to get as much out of the process doing it that way, and residents will get on board with it as long as you sort of approach it in the right way and get the right communication out there.
How do you prepare the crews for these changes? I mean, one of the questions is, have you stayed with the same sort of collection day model and the same shift patterns, or is any of that changing?
Yeah, so the collection day models change, and the slight change is we used to have a model where the recycling rubbish rounds mirrored each other. But what we found is obviously the recycling is getting particularly harder. We operate a glass out model, so we operate with 70-30 split vehicles. It's a much slower operation because you're collecting 2 containers per household rather than rubbish, which is 1 wheel bin in most cases. So rubbish rounds were becoming quite, I'll not use the word easy, but they were a lighter day than the recycling day. So we're moved away from that, and we're having sort of recycling rounds which are more manageable, but rubbish rounds are much bigger in geography. So similar to the food waste principle, where we apply every 3 recycling rounds, you have 2 food waste rounds. So every 3 recycling rounds, generally as a rule, we'll probably have 2 rubbish rounds. But in terms of the crew buy into that, I think because we engage them very early on as part of that design process, once the rounds are finalised, all the maps are then provided to them in terms of printed out, so they could review them, scrutinise them, make any final changes. So I think when it does hit, I don't think there's anything new. So yeah, I think the general buy-in has been pretty positive.
You mentioned early on about a lot of the data that you'd gathered around, servicing times and that kind of thing. Is there any data that you wish you had that you didn't in the ones you've done so far that you think would have helped with the routing?
We'd spent a long time coming up with quite a highly accurate as-is model, a baseline model to compare it to, because and the rationale behind that was, historically, when we've done route optimization exercises, because there was low confidence in the data going in, there was low confidence in the output. So we wanted to do a real piece, hearts and minds piece at the beginning, which is, here is our baseline model, what is actually happening now, present that to the depots and supervisors and crews. So everyone was like, yep, that aligns to what we've got. So there was the confidence in the output of the new model. We had a lot of data in it. I think the only thing we had to take assumptions on, we knew what a round would collect throughout the day, and we apportioned that out to basically an average bin weight on that round. A really high fidelity model would probably have actual bin weight, so actual weighing equipment on the vehicles that would weigh individual bins. Where we have some arrangements where the crew would do a full load and then half a load will be left on the vehicle for the following day, it does skew somewhat of the data a little bit. So it hasn't massively damaged what we've got, and we've not seen any significant negative effects. But if I was being a perfectionist, that would be the nice thing to have in there, is actual bin weights for residence bins.
I know down in Dorset you've got a sort of a specific person and resource who is really embedded in the routing, the actual doing of the algorithms and the design, and that's sort of deliberately apart from the actual operational bit. And then in other places where we work, it's operational people who do that design. What's the what do you think of the pros and cons of the way you've approached it compared to others?
I think we're in quite a positive position where the team that we have, the data team, which is supported by one officer, it's fairly fluid where they sit. They do work very closely with operations and got a really good working relationship. So it isn't us doing something to operations, it's done with them, and I think that works quite well. The line is, and I've heard someone else say this before, operations marking their own homework. I think there needs to be an element of independent scrutiny in the process, and I think the way we do it, personally, I think works quite well, because we're engaging with them, so they're part of the process, but equally we can ensure that it delivers the strategic aims and ambitions that we want to deliver as well.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, Matt. It's been really interesting to hear about what's going on for you, and wish you lots of luck with the next phases.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
So in conclusion, who decides my bin day? Well, it's the local authority, but there's a lot that goes into making that decision.
Yeah, they're definitely not picking the days out of a hat. It's very well considered, taking into account a lot of different factors to make an efficient service.
And if they do change the day, it is because it's really necessary to make that balance.
Yeah, nobody's changing the days for fun. So, what caught your eye this week, Kate?
It was a LinkedIn post from Uttlesford District Council that was thanking their residents for looking out for the collection crews by putting out cold drinks and ice lollies. It's when we've had that really big heat wave. And just coupled with that conversation with Becca about how the crews look out for the residents, it was really nice to see the residents also look out for the crews. And just the fact that, you know, the crews are the face of the council. They are the council workers that most people see week to week, and that there's a real sense of community. You know, people get to know their refuse crews and really care about them.
Yeah, we talk a lot about data and performance and efficiency, and actually it's people picking up other people's bins and providing a community service, so it is good to see.
What caught your eye this week, Tim?
Mine was also a social media post from close to home. Barnsley Council have recently put out a request to residents asking what they would like from their waste service effectively. And I took a dive into the bottom half of the internet, which is not a place you should ever go. And it led me to just think, what is the point of asking the question in the way they've asked it? Because the answers all sum up to, we want it like it was in the olden days, weekly, where the guys pick up the waste over their shoulder, they work task and finish. People just want to roll back the clock to how it used to be. Mm-hmm. And of course, the context of that is that it would cost a fortune, it wouldn't be legal, it wouldn't fit in with any of the government's, central government's, you know, priorities and legislation. So it's a fairly pointless question because you can't have that. But of course, that is what everybody thinks they want.
And I think if you're asking for residents' opinions, there's got to be some parameters within that. Because if everyone says, oh yeah, we want weekly collections back, and you go, well, no, you can't have that. It's like, what's the point? They never listen is then the feeling that people have, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you can have weekly collections. You'd also have an extra £100 a year on your council tax, maybe.
Yeah.
There's got to be that kind of trade-off on those parameters, and that is just absent. So I think the council there have inadvertently set themselves up to be accused of not listening to the consultation because they're not going to be able to give the residents what they want. Certainly the residents that have replied on Facebook.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see whether there is any sort of stats around, you know, if they did a poll or there was a specific set of questions in a questionnaire, it's a bit more tangible, and again, back to data being really useful. Sticking a post on Facebook and getting all kinds of crazy stuff in the comments is, I don't know what you do with that to then sort of work out what the next step is.
No, it looked doomed to be a loser right from the start.
If you've got anything that you want to let us know about this episode or anything you'd like us to talk about, you can get in touch. Tim and I are both on LinkedIn. We've got the Behind the Bins community, and you can email us at behindthebins@bartekmunicipal.com. What we got next week, Tim?
Next week, we are challenging the question that sometimes gets asked of us and of local authorities. It all goes to the same place, doesn't it? Just that general feeling that we're doing all this work to separate our recycling and do the right thing, and then the council put it all in the same truck and it all gets dumped in the same place. Find out in the next episode if that is true or not.
Well, thank you for listening, and we'll hope to see you next time.